Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I too rise to support the Statute Law Revision Bill of 2024, and this very much is an omnibus bill, as we've heard, providing a mechanism for reviewing Victoria's statute books and is required in order to ensure Victorian statutes remain clear, relevant and accurate. The bill makes minor and technical amendments to various acts, including updating references and correcting typographical errors. This serves the broader purpose of ensuring these acts remain relevant and accessible to the Victorian community. There's been some wonderful contributions with a little bit to play with. People have gotten quite creative, including the member for Narre Warren South, whose contribution I refer members to. However, through my contribution on the bill, I'd really like to focus on the changes associated with the Heavy Vehicle National Law Application Act of 2013 and the Road Safety Act of 1986 in the context of the role of our transport and freight sectors, who literally keep the country and the state moving, and the proud transport workers who are the heart and soul of the industry. And Deputy Speaker, while these reforms may be considered minor or inconsequential in the scheme of the broader transport industry, there is certainly nothing minor or inconsequential associated with the role of transport and freight workers. Deputy Speaker, few Victorians fully appreciate the size and the scale of our freight, logistics and transport industry and the entire ecosystem that lies behind our everyday purchases or services, whether it be the food you purchase from the supermarket, attendance at school, visit to the hospital, getting to work, or when you may take that much-earned holiday break via Melbourne Airport. All of these sort of things would not be possible if it wasn't for the transport workers who helped deliver the goods to firstly construct these places and who continue to transport people and deliver the goods to support these spaces. We cannot take for granted that many of our products and services travel hundreds or thousands of kilometres on our roads, rail, sea or air, and it is possible, it really is something to thank the transport workers for through the entire supply chain. Even as demonstrated during the COVID-19 pandemic in particular, our economy can only operate and grow if we are able to move goods from primary producers, manufacturers, wholesalers and importers to the consumer, either at the shop or at home. And Deputy Speaker, as set out in the Victorian Labor Government's Victorian Freight Plan delivering the goods, our freight transport sector continues to be a central economic driver to our state's economic, jobs and skills prosperity. The freight and logistics sector is one of our most important sectors, contributing $21 billion to the Victorian economy, employing around 260,000 Victorians. And across my community of Marybeck, the freight, logistics, warehousing and transport sectors make up over 2,400 local businesses. That's almost 15% of local businesses, the second highest local business sector behind construction, and employs almost 4,000 local residents, equating to 4.2% of local employment for residents. And in this respect, Deputy Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the leadership of the Minister for Roads, Road Safety, Ports and Freight, the member for Williamstown in this place, who continues to do a tremendous job in steering the sector towards the future, and the Minister for Public Transport too, who has an important role, of course. However, Deputy Speaker, I would like to also acknowledge the work of the mighty Transport Workers Union, the TWU, Victorian Tasmanian branch, who now for over 120 years have continued to remain the collective voice for the men and women working across the Australian and Victorian Tasmanian transport industry. First established as the Victorian Carters and Drivers Union, which became the modern TWU, the union now represents over 90,000 employees and owner-operators nationally through a wide range of industries, including aviation, through pilots, ground services, catering and guest services, workers across all aspects of road transportation, from freight, logistics, including energy transportation, and the private bus industry and waste management. And over the years, of course, the TWU has been involved in some of the most important and iconic industrial disputes, always advocating in the best interests of members. For example, winning the right for 2 weeks paid annual leave back in 1945, surging its membership from 20,000 to 36,000 back in 1947 upon securing the 40-hour working week, pioneering industry super back in 1986 with the formation of the Transport Workers Superannuation Award in 1986, and commendations to Matt Rocks, who to this very day still serves that fund very diligently. In 2012, the 20 Years Safe Freight campaign culminated in the passing of groundbreaking legislation to establish the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, which sadly was later disbanded by the previous Turnbull Liberal government, and in more recent times has taken on and won in some of the most important industrial disputes in modern times, including against Qantas and the passage of the Closing the Loopholes Bill in Federal Parliament, which I'll touch on very shortly. However, Deputy Speaker, notwithstanding the positive contributions the transport and freight sector makes to our economy and the good work of the TWU, the fact remains that working in the transport sector, which this bill goes to the very heart of through reforms to the Heavy Vehicle Act of 2013, remains one of the country's most dangerous jobs and sectors to work in. Deputy Speaker, Australian road transport workers are sadly 10 times more likely to die at work than workers in other industries. Whether operating heavy freight trucks, or their owner-drivers, or they're driving vans, cars, motorcycles, gig economy workers who ride e-scooters or bikes, deteriorating safety standards across the industry have continued to compound safety issues for workers and indeed local communities through which they travel. As set out by the Transport Workers Union submission and appearance by Nick McIntosh, the Assistant National Secretary, at the recent parliamentary inquiry into vulnerable road user safety, and I acknowledge the Chair, who's the member for Ballerine in that respect, since 2016 there have been over 1,000 truck crash deaths, and over 250 of those deaths were truck drivers. As an industry marked by severe financial pressure from the corporates, including major retailers, manufacturers, energy companies, stevedores, freight forwarders and airports, the continued lowering of transport costs, including through the Amazon and the Uber effect, increasingly late payment terms, all result in very tight margins and low capital flows through the industry and supply chains, which has a significant impact on a number of safety issues, including wage theft and the non-payment of superannuation through the industry, which is sadly very rampant. A recent Safe Work Australia survey found 31% of transport employers say workers ignore safety rules to get the job done. That is, to fulfil the requirements imposed onto them by their employers. 20% of transport employers accept dangerous behaviour compared to 2% in other industries, and 20% of transport employers break safety rules to meet deadlines compared to just 6% in other industries. A Federal Department of Infrastructure report in 2016 also noted that heavy trucks are disproportionately involved in casualty crashes. Approximately 16% of road crash fatalities and 4% of injuries involve these vehicles. And the ABS data shows that trucks represent just 3.6% of registered motor vehicles in Australia, yet trucking is the most deadliest and hazardous industry. That is why the TWU has been campaigning for over a decade for safe rates. We know that the safety of transport drivers on our roads is linked to the rates of pay and better conditions and standards for drivers, but also improving safety for all road and vulnerable road user communities. The emergence of the gig economy has also escalated the significance and the need for safe rates. The Amazon effect of the gig economy is dragging down rates, compliance and safety. Workers engaged by online platforms like Uber or Amazon provide insecure work and inadequate rights and protections for workers, which compromises safety for drivers and all road users. Again, as we heard during the recent road safety inquiry, gig delivery drivers are people who access work through digital platforms that offer on-demand services. Think of Uber Eats, DoorDash, Foodora and others. And according to the evidence received by the road safety partners of the state government, and the member of Shepparton is of course part of that inquiry too, the Deputy Chair, the number of bike and motorcycle riders injured while working increased steadily between 2016 and 2020. Of the 19,707 bike riders and motorcyclists injured in police-reported collisions between the 1st of January 2016 and April 21, and whose journey purpose was recorded 80% of cases, 686 were working at the time of the injury and 3 of them lost their lives very tragically while working. The number of riders injured while working rose from 93 in 2016 up to 170, Deputy Speaker, in 2020. And an analysis of the motorcycle crash times, locations, rider profiles suggests a strong correlation between the growth of the food delivery industry and more motorcyclists on the road. And that's why I'm so proud to report to the Chamber that after years of campaigning, only last month the TWU managed to deliver and secure the transport reform that's long overdue through the Federal Parliament's Closing the Loophole legislation. The landmark reform will mean the Fair Work Commission can set enforceable minimum standards for any sector of the transport industry and is a system for all TWU members, including owner drivers and gig workers, ending the deadly squeeze from the top of supply chains and the Amazon effect by disrupting the entire industry. To get this huge legislation from law into the workplace, I commend the TWU for all their efforts and their members over the many years to get this outcome. And in this respect, I do pay tribute to the outgoing State Secretary of the TWU, Mike McNess, who after 30 years has diligently served the transport workers sector so well and achieved so much during his time, including with landmark agreements, with toll, secured bus reform, same job, same pay legislation reform, secured jobs and better pay legislation, and beating Qantas twice in the federal court and the High Court indeed. But I do, in doing so, also acknowledge my very good friend Mem Suleiman, who has been elevated to the new Secretary's role and who will lead the union in very sturdy times indeed. And he's been involved in quite a few negotiations to get good outcomes for members with Jetstar, Star Trek, Rivet, Saputo, Dysons, TGE, Seaford and Starling. And Mem really will be a steady hand at the wheel for the union. I commend the Assistant Secretary Dicio Marcos to the elevation of the position of Assistant Secretary, and his passion for the transport sector started way back in 2005 with Qantas. And of course this bill goes to quite a number of road safety reforms and heavy vehicle reforms too, which also touch on the entire supply chain. You know, I genuinely do believe this is not an inconsequential bill in many ways because the transport sector very much welcomes it.